Hello, welcome to Why Not Both. My name is Pam Schaefer, and I'm a musician and therapist in Los Angeles. Why Not Both is all about how our multiple passions inform our identity, and this season we are brought to you by Under the Radar magazine and produced by Laura Studeris. If you like what you hear, please make sure to like us and subscribe to us on your favorite podcast platform, and come spend time with us on social media. We are at WNB the podcast, and that is both on Instagram and on Twitter. For this episode of Why Not Both, we got to talk with Norwegian singer and songwriter Sondre Lerche. He also is quite fond of scented candles and burgers, but you'll discover more about him in our interview. I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for doing this. I know that it's been like the most bizarre ever circumstance. So,
well, yeah, for everybody, it's these are wild times, but it's good to talk to someone. And it's sort of, it is in a way the best and the worst thing to happen, which feels almost cynical because people are suffering and dying and losing their jobs, and who knows how I'll feel about all of this, in a couple of months from now. But it does feel somewhat redeeming to be sharing music in the form of an album called Patience at this time,
That's the best welcome to this podcast I could have imagined. Like, I did think about that I was just like, oh man, Sondre has had this amazing alliterative string of albums that I feel very blessed by because my name starts with P as well. So yes. I'm like, I'm partial to them. That's like chef's kiss. Well done.
Yeah, I started writing songs for this album in 2012, and we started recording it in 2014. And of course, as you know, I've recorded other records while doing, working on this one as well. But it's been a long time coming, and clearly I had no idea what kind of world I would be, launching this music called Patience into.
Right.
It's I guess we're low on a lot of things, but I guess definitely a currency that we are being challenged in is patience. We're all telling each other to be patient, and we're trying to be patient with ourselves and our loved ones and with the situation, but it's easier said than done, of course. But hopefully there's thankfully there's music, there's music called Patience, and of course there's other music as well. It doesn't always all have to be Patience, but it does feel like an album. I feel good about sharing this album. Obviously, it only comes out June 5th, but I feel good about like sort of entering into the era of this album just for myself and for my own little operation, and it feels like something valuable to share with whoever's listening.
Well, and I do think it's funny that, like you said, and at least you have an album release date. It was funny. I noticed on your socials, people were asking, well, when is it coming out? And I thought that was so funny because the album is called Patience. It was like, it's the old, are we there yet? Are we there yet?
Exactly. It's something that's given me a lot of joy, I guess torturing my listeners that way. But it's just too good. You can't, you have to just go there because it's the answer to any question about this album. It is just, patience, child, patience. You can get away with anything. And it is, it seems just on brand really that we are, I am stretching this out a little bit,
It's so funny. Well, I love anytime you posted another burger blog, people are like, so about the album, and you're like, I give it 7 out of 10 burgers.
Yeah, and now that I'm only talking about the album and the singles and the videos, people are like, when are you going to post another burger blog?
And you're like, come on, am I not enough for you?
Yeah, right. I can't do both patience, and burger at the same time. They're two different characters. I can't access them at the same time, or maybe I can. I don't know. Maybe the burger blog will return at some point. I don't know.
I mean, I was just happy that you finally made it to the Apple Pan, because I went there all the time as a kid. That's why I kept messaging you being like, did you go yet? Did you go to the Apple Pan?
Yes.
It's
I had a great time there, and it's funny, just like I guess a month or a month and a half ago, I woke up and I had this like feeling where I was like, oh, I have to go back to the Apple Pan today. and so because I'm still new in LA, I like just walking around exploring. People laugh at me when I say I walk in LA, but I like to walk anywhere I am, and I like to explore things just on my own, walking around, listening to music, and now I've started exploring LA by bus. So I've started taking the bus everywhere. So
you're a bold man.
I'm a bold man. I took the bus to, I took it a little too far because I got off the wrong stop, but
you end up at the ocean if you take it too far.
yeah, no, exactly. And I had to walk for like 40 minutes, but, and then I had so now I tried the other Apple Pan burger, the one that's a different sauce, I guess.
The alternate sauce.
Almost it's a little bit barbecue sauce-esque. It was good. It's not necessarily what I'm looking for, but I had to try it because it's on the menu. Yeah.
That's so funny. I'm living vicariously through your burgers because I don't eat meat anymore because it upsets my stomach, and that's very sad. Because I feel like a terrible vegetarian right now admitting that I'm like, I'm vegetarian because it actually bugs my stomach. I feel like I should be like, fight for the animals, but I'm like, animals are low-key delicious. That sounds terrible.
Yeah. Well, I think whatever reason you're being a vegetarian is, you're doing something good for society, and it's like killing how many birds with one stone? I don't know. Why would I don't know.
Now we're throwing rocks at birds. It's a weird podcast.
Yeah, sorry.
Why are you so weird, Sondre? No.
Yes, this is what we're going to talk about, right? Why am I so weird?
Why am I so weird? No, that's literally the thesis of my podcast. I started this.
Okay, good.
Yeah, to be like, everyone is really weird. Maybe if we're weird together, it'll make it more normal.
Yeah, I believe that.
No, I think that people should eat consciously. Like, I mean, it would be odd if you had a burger every day, because that's a lot of cows.
That's a lot. It's terrible. And to be honest, when I first, before I lived in LA, if I would come to LA for 5 days, I would probably go to In-N-Out every day of the week. And that's a confession, and it's not okay at all. So when I moved here, I had to learn, first of all, it's not okay to go to In-N-Out every day, every week even, and of course, I talk about my burgers, but I don't eat a lot of meat outside of the burger thing, and I actually, if I cook a burger at home, it's always a vegetarian burger. So yesterday I cooked veggie burgers for myself.
Hey!
I feel, so and now actually, now that I'm in Norway, spoiler alert, I'm in Norway. I cannot have, there are no really tremendous burger experiences here. Certainly no In-N-Out or anything like that. So when I'm here, I don't have burgers. I don't, I only have oatmeal, really.
But you make it look very festive.
I try, it's an everyday struggle. I want to say it's an you try to color the everyday as you like to see it.
That's so funny. When you said there's not really a tremendous burger experience in Norway, I was reflecting actually on last I was in Iceland. my friends wanted to take me to what approximated an American food place just to see if it was like American food, apparently, because they were using
Uh-huh.
their barometer.
Yeah.
Um, and the burger, I mean, I didn't eat it because I don't eat meat, but they made a version for me that like the burger was made out of beets.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, this is absolutely nothing like American food. But on the other hand, this is delightful.
It's delightful. There's a really good in Norway. You can buy at the store a really good beet, like veggie beet based burger patty, and it's really really good. I've cooked it at home many times. It's a really great, and obviously it doesn't taste in a way anything like a burger, but
Right.
you can put burger stuff on it and you can have a great time. It's and beets are good for you, and beets, that's it. It has a nice texture. It's
Good
great.
consistency.
Yeah, really good.
That's that's awesome. Now I'm wondering, I was like, I wonder if it's the same kind of beet burger. Curious.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe.
Questions forming in my mind.
Yeah.
So you're back in Norway, and I was actually curious about the book that you wrote because it's in fact in Norwegian, correct? So
Yes, this is true.
I would have to then learn Norwegian on Duolingo to read your book right now.
Sort of, yeah. I guess we could Google Translate it and see what happens, but I have a feeling it would not turn out so eloquent. Let's just put it that way.
It could be the alternate version of your book, which would be very fanciful.
Yeah, exactly. I'd be curious just how, to which extent it would get me. But I am working on a translation into English so that people who are not Norwegian, I realize that we are in the minority really in the global scale. So it would be nice if someone else could read it, and I'd be delighted to share it. It's been really a fun project. It's something that's happened over several years. It's something that started because I occasionally would write music essays for some Norwegian publications, and I could write about things that I music that I really cared about, or even musical experiences that I was curious about. And because I make music myself, you can, I write about other artists, but very often I found myself writing about my own identity, or finding myself
Mhm.
through other people's music, and there's room for that. And so I always wanted to see if these essays could sort of become something more if you put them together in a different context, not as an article
Mhm.
in a newspaper, but in a book. And I got to work with this really great editor here in Norway, and so all the texts were really expanded because it's in a newspaper essay, you have to put so much information in over, so well, this, like over short amount of time, so like when you write a book, you can let it breathe a bit more, and you can digress. Yeah.
What was it like going back and expanding upon some of those ideas? Because I mean, I'm only making the assumption that some of the essays were rather personal in regards to your relationship with the music. And what was it like exploring that in a deeper way?
It was a really, for me, doing that is really something that I learn a lot from as a writer. Getting to work with a great editor is you know like getting a free writing class, really,
Mm-hmm.
because you're both getting the benefit of somebody trying to get as deep into the text as you are, and revealing new things from it. And what we did was, he read everything I'd written, and then just gave me notes on everything, mainly notes that were saying, "Oh, this is interesting. Tell me more about this." this is confusing. This probably needs to go away because it's very, this has more to do with newspaper format, or it's connected
Uh-huh.
to something that was in the moment, and so I would just get all these notes, and then I would write based on that, and I would digress really, and expand, and a lot of the questions I got were really personal questions, like,
Mhm.
well, and so in this correspondence, and he would be in Norway, I would be in LA, and every
Right.
morning I'd wake up and I'd have received a new email
Mhm.
with new notes, and I would write and send it back, and then next morning I'd get new notes, and we worked like that every day
Wow.
for half a year, and so everything grew, and I learned a lot about, um just writing, and making the text come alive, and making it really personal in a sense, but also trying to open it up for more general readers. You don't
Mhm.
want it to feel very exclusive,
Right.
and I didn't want it to feel too, like, sort of nerdy, in the sense that, oh, okay, this only makes sense if you have this kind of record collection. I wanted to try to have it not be this sort of exclusive thing, which,
Yeah.
very often music talk about music, certainly for people like me, and for people like you, who are very into music. It can often be a sort of excluding thing, and I
Yeah.
wanted to really try to challenge myself to open it up to more people, so it doesn't feel like just a bunch of name dropping, and then if you don't know these names, it just feels like you're left out of a conversation.
What I was thinking when you were talking about that was the relationship you had with your editor almost reminds me of the relationship that sometimes you have with a producer engineer on albums, where you really have to trust them, because you can like toss an idea out and be like, here's my song idea. And they're like, and they kind of yes and with you. They're like, oh, I see where you're going. Have you thought of this route too?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it is. There's a lot of parallels and even I was thinking now, even to therapy, I would, it's sort of like, and I certainly, a producer very often is like a therapist, also like a musical therapist. So there are a lot of parallels, and that level of trust. I think for me also, it was refreshing to be in a position where I, I've made a lot of records, and I have a lot of thoughts and opinions about how I want to make a record, and how I sort of try to get the best out of the collaborators that I have at my disposal, and even if it's the producer. But
Mhm.
seeing as I haven't really made a book before, I had to you have to enter into it, with maybe maybe a bit more humility than I entered the studio. Probably, if I'm being honest, and because I clearly haven't done this before, and so there is a bit more of blind trust that
Yep.
this is. I really need the I need to learn from the authority, and
Mhm.
the knowledge of this other person who is trying to go deep into this with me, and I that's like a learning situation that I find really exciting, and inspiring. I guess that's the job of a good producer and a good editor, also, is to just inspire you to think that it can be.
Yeah, because
And
sometimes
that's
I mean, I would imagine, and I don't want to be presumptuous, but you've been making albums for a long time, but like you said, you'd not made a book. And so having someone that's like, yes, you can do this, here's how,
yeah.
sounds like that would be really
Yeah,
valuable.
exactly. Hey, yeah, you can definitely do this. This is great stuff. And I'll help you. I'll
Yeah.
help you. Whatever you don't know, I know, and together we can make it real.
And that, I love that, because I remember you inspired me to attempt to run while hiking, because I'm often in the
Uh-huh.
same hills.
Yeah.
And I like you for that, and also dislike you for that. I think
Yeah.
what did I tell you, that it felt like I had toothpaste in my lungs? Like I think I was like taking in so much air because I'm not used to like actually
breathing that hard while trying to run.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. It's tricky. I think that a common mistake, of course, with anything that we do or want to start doing, is that we start aiming too high and trying
Yeah.
to do too much, and then we get discouraged, and then we feel, well, that didn't work. And instead, we should always try to, you know, go soft, like ease into it, and then build. And certainly with running, it's so easy to get injured. I certainly, when I started running, I had no idea what the hell I was doing, and I felt I should just run further and further because that's the only way up, and then you end up just injuring yourself like an idiot.
Oh, I
So
was like, oh no, injured Sondre. Like,
yeah, it's happened a lot, and it's still happening because I'm still sort of learning really how to train my body really in a
yeah.
way that I haven't ever done anything athletic. So yeah, I hope you don't feel completely discouraged from running. You just have to ease into it. Yeah.
I mean, I did think it was funny. A few things stood out in my mind. I went back over our conversation before talking to you today, and I was laughing because I had said that I like downhill more, and you're like, "Oh, well, that's like a freebie."
Yeah, that's a typical runner's like. Oh yeah, that's the easy way out. Also, what I've realized is that I'm not interested in downhill anymore, also because it's just bad for your knees, and
Yeah,
it's the freebie that will sort of ruin you.
right. And
Yeah,
it's funny because I had never run really because I've been a swimmer mainly. I have very loose
right,
joints, and so like
right,
I can swim forever. I used to do like distance swimming, but I'd never done running because I'm like built sideways. It's like I'm put together with paper clips. Um,
right.
and so, but I was like, I'm going to give it a go. And it was funny because I also noticed in our conversation that you were so excited about running because you were like, I have a hobby. And that was so
Yes.
interesting to me that you were so excited to have a hobby. And I was like, that's precious, but it also speaks to kind of the circumstance of your life.
Yeah, it is very strange to me to have a hobby. It's a very I've never since you know got into music at a very young age. I don't I can't I was thinking about it. I don't think I've ever felt that I have a hobby that isn't music, and music is, of course, just become my life in so many ways. It still is my hobby, but it's also my professional life, and it's a
Mm-hmm.
big part of my identity and all these things. So when I actually started getting serious about running and really enjoying it, and it really served a purpose in my life, it was a strange sensation to sort of accept that this is a part of my identity, and
Yeah.
now I suddenly have friends who I know from running, and
Oh my God.
I know people mainly from music. If I don't know them from music, usually they're my family. Then I know them from birth. So it's very
Yeah.
strange to me to be knowing people from running. Yeah.
That's so sweet. I was like, do you have like a running mentor? Because you had mentioned that like you didn't know what you were doing at first, which makes total sense. I clearly didn't know what I was doing either when I
Right.
your suggestion. By the way, I've been lightly frolicking is how I'd put it.
Okay,
Um,
that's good. That's good.
where
I like that.
yeah, where like I do the walking up and down a lot, but like I've been like doing like a light jog or maybe try
Great.
skipping or like,
Yeah.
kind of switch it up a little bit. And it also dissuades people from talking to you on the trail if you're skipping, which is nice because
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I, I
Good.
not to sound unsociable, but like if I'm
No,
in the mode where I'm hiking alone, I probably don't want to have a conversation with someone. I'm in my own like meditative headspace.
exactly. It's a sacred time, and it's a sacred space. And when if you're jogging or skipping or anything in between, you are signifying to the world that I'm occupied. I'm doing my thing here, and I think yeah, and of course, I think a great thing about running, to me at least, has been the that it's like meditation. It's meditative.
Yes.
So it has this sort of like, it frees, especially in this day and age when we're so attached to our phones and all the things that the phone holds. It's just great to have a sort of an area where you put the phone away and you disconnect from that, and I just clear my mind. And then of course sometimes you you have a specific thing you really need to think about and assess your thoughts, and then you can put all the thoughts into the run, and just, so it's both clearing the mind and sort of filling it up with exactly what you need to be thinking about, and not all of these distractions, that take up so much time.
Do you ever find yourself writing while you're running?
I find myself editing.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I find myself editing. It's usually something that I'm sort of chewing over, and something that's in the works, and I'll be thinking about, it could be musically or structure wise or lyrically, but yeah, I find myself like editing, and then when I get back, I'll have to immediately write down or get to the guitar or capture the thought process. But sometimes I'll be writing, I guess maybe mainly lyrically. I'll be like, oh, that's the line, and that feels like it fits in terms of syllables and all these concerns. But it is a great, and that usually just happens. That's I find like in songwriting, I have to always be trying to work. I can't wait for inspiration to hit. I have to be diligent and have a certain discipline. But when it comes to that part of the process that happens when I'm running, that's just something that comes to you when it's clearly something, it's a puzzle you're trying to solve, and then it just comes to you. And so that's a very sort of organic thing that I don't go on a run thinking, okay, now I'm going to solve this problem. It just comes to me if that's what's on my mind, and that's sort of nice.
That's really beautiful. Like I relate to that a lot, in that when I start a hike, and it's funny because I take the same several trails usually, and so they're kind of predictable in a way where it's like I know where I'm going, so I don't have to necessarily think about like which trail I'm going to take. It's like I pick whichever trail it is that I'm on, but I pick a familiar one. And then I sometimes wonder at the start of the trail, like, oh, I wonder what this hike is going to bring me. It always yields something. Like that's what's really interesting to me about the process, is that there's always, and you don't know what it's going to be at the beginning of the hike. Like you don't know what gift you're going to get.
Exactly. It's never a waste of time. You never regret it. And it always surprises you with something, and it's a wonderful, it's given my life, a great new dimension. And it was, part of the reason I was drawn to LA was that to move to LA was that I could just see that, oh, well, in this is the kind of town I could do more of this. I could be running more. I wouldn't be inhibited by the climate as much. I would have more access to nature, because really the nature surrounding Los Angeles is stunning. And I think a lot of people who haven't spent a lot of time there have no idea what really what treasures are accessible to people there.
As a native, I'm very glad that you see it that way, because in some ways I think that people get really because it's such a oddly famous place, people get different ideas in their heads about my hometown.
Exactly. Yeah, it must be so frustrating to have to sort of, I don't know, to find yourself all in a defensive situation all the time when it comes to, I guess maybe it feels like people are warming up to LA much more now, but I had certainly, it took me years to really appreciate or to see and understand how rich the experience of LA really is. It's so easy to dismiss it, and I think a lot of people do and have done that. And I think people maybe now feels like a lot of people are discovering the beauty of LA.
Well, and I appreciate that also you've already kind of, it's interesting. I was about to say ingratiated yourself to the LA community, but in a way, you've actually kind of started your own thing within the LA community, which I find fascinating. Like, I'm more of a studio rat personally. Like, if you stick me in a room with a bunch of synthesizers and tell me, don't come out, here's your hoodie and your coffee, go. I'm like, goodbye, world. Whereas, like, you're such a performer, and I admire that about you. And you've already created kind of like a performance pod here, which is amazing. Like watching you at like Largo and then at the Standard, like you're definitely making this like kind of like, you aren't taking it over in a way of like it being unnatural, but you're making it such a good place for you.
Well, thank you. That's very kind. I've felt very blessed to so quickly find, and I guess I knew going in, or making the move to LA, I had come to LA for a couple of sort of longer periods to feel out the vibes, and I knew I had some friends at Largo, at that community. I'd played there a couple of times before, and it felt like I had like sort of a community there that I definitely felt like, well, it would be so lovely to be closer to this community of musicians and performers and to feel a part of that. And so yeah, but I didn't, that's another thing. I didn't know how rich that experience would be to me, and how the extent to which I would feel a part of that. And also just in turn, for me, being in sort of the completing stages of making my album, finishing my album, Patience, that I would have from the moment I moved to LA, I would have Largo as this sort of arena where I could come in and be a guest, with someone else's show and try out these new songs that I had just written, really, and that I was intending to record for the album. So a lot of the key songs on Patience, I tried out over and over, and I got confident with performing in front of unsuspecting audiences at Largo. And it was great. It was a really, really, to be able to come, be in front of an audience that really, some of them maybe know some of my stuff, but most of them probably have no idea who I am. And to play a song that they don't know if this is a song I wrote 20 years ago or yesterday. And very often they would be a song I wrote yesterday or I completed yesterday. It felt great, and that stage there, the community makes it feel so secure. So I feel really thankful that immediately, especially because when I moved to LA, I didn't want to tour. And I was, for the first time in my life, I was taking a step away from traveling and touring, and I wanted to just be in one place, and I wanted to write this record. I wanted to write this book. I wanted to do stuff I could do at home, but I love performing. And so that is a hard thing for me to actually sort of heed my own choice. And so for me to be able to then to have an outlet, where I could go to Largo and I could perform every now and then, and with, I could do my own shows and have guests come, but I could also just slip in the back and just play a couple of songs and for, somebody else's comedy show. It was and I could sort of get that performance bug out of my system, every now and then, and not feel completely shut down in terms of, performance, my performance needs, Your
performance needs.
Yeah. I guess I have come to terms with the fact that I really do love performing, and I fell out of love with traveling / touring, I guess, after the Pleasure tour, because it was just so intense. It was so much, and so it for a while I was wondering, like, will I ever want to perform again? And then I realized, well, yeah, I'll probably always perform. I just I just can't do it as intensely as which makes sense.
Yeah, when you said like the athleticism, I was just like, that running became so important to you. I was thinking about actually on that tour, because I remember you talking about that tour, and it looked like, I mean, you were having like a mad dance party every night. Like you're
It
basically
was,
eating jazz
yeah,
guys.
absolutely. It was a 90-minute aerobics
Yeah.
class while singing, and of course, taking your shirt off and jumping into the crowd and having a techno party for at least 20 minutes every night. And so it's really what got me into running, because I had to run to get in shape for the tour. And then I had to sort of stay in shape to keep doing the tour and to be able to sing and move.
Oh my God. Yeah.
It was a whole nother level. And clearly I'm nowhere near the Beyonce level of that kind of performance, but it has made me appreciate the physical discipline and precision that kind of performer goes through to do what they do. It's incredible, and then it's inspired me to keep going and to keep challenging myself, beyond just musical challenges, it's fun to learn new things, and it's fun to try to incorporate new disciplines into what you do and your sort of repertoire, in a sense.
Yeah, and in a way, like when you were talking about how people through music or through being born into your family, I was thinking about that, about like how we have this narrative of being monofocused, but at the same time, it seems like being so focused on music is what brought you to these other things. And I'm like,
yeah, exactly. That's true. And that's a beautiful thing. Music has brought me to so many things way beyond music. And I feel very, very, very privileged. And it makes me work very, very hard, because I want to justify, or I want to pay, I want to return the favor, in a sense. I want to make it worth, worth all these gifts, in a sense,
Well, and I really liked, it's funny, I was reflecting on when I met you, because it's funny, Laura, did you know that Laura Studers is the producer of the podcast?
Yeah. Yeah. I saw her on some email. Yeah. And I talked to her for another thing last week.
Yes.
I did. Yeah. On, we did 2 interviews in one, I think.
That is so funny. I'm like, in other news, it's, we all know each other.
Yes.
It's weird, but it's good. And it's what like music has brought us all together. Laura was the first writer she's the first person who ever wrote about my music, and we subsequently became good friends. Yeah. And then
wonderful.
Right? I'm just like, it's very one of those things where like 10 years ago, if you'd been like, all right, this lady, she's going to write about your music on her blog.
Yeah.
And then,
well, and she's so wonderful. Also, she's such a friend of Norway or the Norwegian music scene. She's someone who's always looked to other countries and other cultures to find and to focus on stuff that that it's not just America or England or these hubs of popular culture. It's actually happening all these other places, and that makes a great difference to a lot of these smaller music communities that actually have so much to offer, like the Norwegian music scene. And she's always been such a great supporter of a lot of my music, but also a lot of my friends who are in Bergen and Oslo and other places making music, and that doesn't go unnoticed.
Oh, I was just like, my heart swells with pride for I'm like,
yeah.
I'm like, that's my friend you're talking about. She's great.
She's good.
But yeah, it made me think of Laura when you said that, because she was the one that insisted that I meet you at that conference, because she's
exactly
like,
right.
Yeah. And like, she was just like, no, you two have to connect. She's just like, I know you enjoy his music. I know you respect his writing so much. And she was just, just go to his panel. And I was like, of course I'm going to go to his panel. But
And that was so fun. That was such a fun, new strange experience. Being on a panel in an American songwriter society type thing. It felt very sort of out of my element, but also sort of I'm into
like,
this.
I
This
could
is
do
pretty
that.
cool. I
Yeah,
can do
like
this.
it was funny because it was the first time I'd like, we'd been like internet friends, like we'd tweeted,
Yeah.
but like
Yeah.
I'd not like actually met you before, and it's quite different. And I appreciated how attentive you were to the people that were asking you questions, and how even though like I could tell that you're like slightly fish out of water style,
Yes.
that were that like worked to your advantage, because you gave really honest feedback to people, and it seemed like you genuinely really wanted to help, and that I thought was really cool. Some of the other panels I saw, and I won't like dunk on anybody, but it's like some people, it was more of a sales pitch for their own thing, and it was about their own ego.
Right. Right.
And what struck me about what you did was that you were very attentive to other people, and it was about being in service to others as opposed to it being about you.
Well, that's good. Like, that's really the only reason to do something like that. I guess we're all there trying to connect with other people who are inspiring, or who are in a position to do something. But really, like, if you're going up on a panel, like, and you have to try to say something constructive to whoever is looking for answers, and that's really hard, of course. In some situations, it's really hard to, we all struggle to sort of say meaningful things, even when we're not prompted. And so when you put yourself in that position, it can be really, really tricky. I had a little bit of training when I was in my sort of parallel life in Norway. I was a mentor on The Voice in Norway.
Oh my goodness!
For 3 seasons, on television and all that. But it was actually a really meaningful. I learned a lot in when it comes to sort of what. Obviously, there you're also making entertainment. You were making television entertainment, but the point of a show like that, as opposed to show like American Idol, where part of the shtick is that there's an element of humiliation, but
Right.
The Voice, there's that they didn't want any of that. That it's part of the concept that we're going to make people feel good, but we're also going to try to be constructive, because we are trying to be professional, and it's hard to do sometimes, to be both constructive and positive. But it's a really, really good challenge to sort of always try to find the good thing, and to find the thing that, well, if I was you, because you're constantly putting yourself in the situation of whoever is performing.
Right.
And as a professional, whether you're on television or you're just doing your thing at home, I think it's always good to try to remind yourself of, okay, well, what does it feel like to stand up there and to sort of feel that you have nothing but whatever you're showing in the moment, and everything is about this moment. And can I try to identify with that and understand, what is it this person, if I was this person, what would I need to or want to hear? And it's a good exercise to sort of refresh on what that would mean. And to do it, of course, on live television is intense.
Wow.
Because you have to also be really concise, because we have to cut to a commercial in 5 seconds, So it was certainly also another fish out of water experience for me. But it was definitely something I learned a lot from. And I learned a lot about, like, how music, we know that music is subjective, but it really made me understand and appreciate that everyone's experience, and it shouldn't have to be said, but everyone's sort of experience with music is as valuable as your own. And it's so easy to be sort of snotty and snobbish I certainly was growing up, my whole identity was music. And part of that identity is like sort of pointing at the thing that you don't approve of,
Right.
that, okay, this is less valuable than this, which is great and which I understand and I love and I cherish, so, and, that's fine when you're a kid or you're a teenager, but when we grow up, I believe, and I learned a lot about this also from writing the book.
I was just thinking about.
Yeah, like where there's a whole chapter about really just owning the subjectivity of music and appreciating that means that someone who likes and loves music that you completely cannot understand or that you find horrendous, that experience is as valuable and as real as your own experience of the music that you cherish, that very likely a lot of people out there will never ever find enjoyment in. And so that brings us further to the whole concept of guilty pleasures. Why should pleasures be guilty, especially in music?
Right.
And so I argue in the book and in real life, at this point in my life, like there is no guilty pleasure in music. There is only pleasure.
I'm like, I don't know if you could hear my smile, but I'm smiling.
Good. I'm glad to hear.
I was like, I turned the video off to save bandwidth for the internet, but I'm smiling and it's goofy because I have giant headphones on.
That's amazing. That's good. I'm glad to hear that.
I agree with you that I was thinking about songs that initially when I heard them, I either didn't like them or they didn't catch my interest. And then it was somehow like 4 or 5 listens in, because I'll do that to myself sometimes, or if I hear something and I really don't like it, I actually sometimes will listen to it again. I actually find that there are interesting things and things that I didn't like.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like I'm looking for like, did it at least catch me emotionally in some way? And I find that so interesting because it was when you were saying about how, that sometimes we define ourselves when we're younger by what we don't like. It's like that exclusionary thing you were talking about in the book that
Yeah.
you wanted to get away from.
Yeah.
And I was just like, yeah, I truly believe in that. And like the fact that I love that you cover Britney Spears songs. I love that.
Yeah. I find it, and I obviously I've always known her most famous songs and stuff. And I have some, deep cut favorites from through the years. But when I learned how to play some of the songs is when you really start appreciating how great some of the songs are. And every time, is a song that she co-wrote. It's a very, very beautiful song. And then you start also understanding what the songs mean to people, and that they have meant to people long before you maybe suddenly started seeing the value in this music that maybe you disregarded at the time it came out. We have all, we're not going to be ready for all the same music at the same time, and we're still not. There's still tons. It doesn't mean that you like everything. It just means that you acknowledge the quality in something that you maybe aren't as appreciative of, and that's fine. But that we are mindful. I think music is empathy, and that is why I feel, why should there be shame, and why should we shame each other in music? I've certainly done my bit of shaming, as a pretentious music snob, given an audience also at a very young age. It's just so pointless. Music is it should be a shame-free safe zone, and I that's something I feel also with this album with Patience. I wanted to create a safe space for dealing with uncomfortable things, dealing with contradictions, dealing with things you are maybe not so proud of, and dealing with your own inadequacy. And that's, and still make it something that feels safe and soothing somehow, and that's what the album is about. And it's sort of an extension of some of that sort of musical empathy in a sense, the capacity of music to create empathy and to make you feel safe, even when you are exploring and bearing all these uncomfortable things.
I love that. I was trying to remember what exactly I said to Laura after hearing it. Oh yeah, I said that it sounded kind of like postmodern orange crate art, and it made me feel really good.
Oh yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. I love that.
I think that that's wonderful to be. It's something a yoga teacher said to me, which is so LA. I was just like my inner Valley girl. I'm like, oh my God, Cassandra, you wouldn't believe what you said. No, she said that it's a skill to be comfortable in a place of discomfort.
Yeah, right.
And I was like, heck yeah, yoga teacher, as I'm like trying not to fall over.
That is very good. Yeah.
Or, it's to not judge your emotions as good or bad or otherwise. It's just accepting like that's where you're at, and that emotions are transient anyway. To just be comfortable in sometimes places of discomfort, not necessarily pain. Like you don't have to, like court pain in a way. But if something is weird, you can be like, all right, well, guess this is weird right now, and just roll with it instead of trying to fight against the weird, because then you feel ashamed and weird.
Yeah, I think it's very true, and it is about that. Yeah, like that whole, like not exactly judging it as good or bad, but just it is, and giving that a sort of arena to. Of course, if you want to improve it, if for the future, well, then we're all learning as we're going, but accepting what is and trying to not cover it up necessarily,
Right. And I feel in a way that, it's cool to see your progression as an artist, because I started listening to you when your first album came to our college radio station.
Right. When was this?
Back in the Stone Age. When you and I were both just young.
Yes, exactly.
It was 84 years ago. No, because I think you and I are actually, I think that we're contemporaries.
Yeah. I'm born in 82.
I'm born in 82.
There you go.
There you go.
Amazing.
Yeah. So it was cool hearing the progression in your music and hearing you now speak to kind of like maturation of how you approach music. I was like, oh, this makes total sense. Like listening to your catalog and hearing you talk about it, I'm like, yeah, that checks out.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's of course all a process, and it's I'm exploring and doing and expressing things now that I never ever thought or would conceive of as like areas of interest, or even stuff if my 18-year-old self, the Faces Down self, was in the audience at one of my pleasure shows, I think that person would be so embarrassed.
Oh,
and because they would be like so far out of the comfort zone that it would just feel like, oh my God, it's and I like to think that there's something I'll do in 20 years that would challenge sort of what would I be comfortable with now, that it's a constantly evolving. And
that's so funny, because now that I think about it, I think I'm like, I feel like I'm replaying like Sondre memories in my head while talking to you, which is very strange.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, when did I first see you play? Yeah, I first saw you play, I think it was my sophomore year of college. I think I saw you in Seattle and then at the Troubadour. Like, I think I saw you.
Okay, yeah.
I think about that versus the last time I saw you. I keep watching your shows and then you're sitting behind me while other people are performing, and it cracks me up. You've been 2 for 2 on that.
Yeah. Sorry.
I keep being like, oh man, I wonder if Sondre's seeing how great this is, and then you're right behind me, and I'm like, what? And I think about the difference in almost kind of like the ease with which you're performing now, and also like, creating showcases for other people, and how different that is, and like, kind of the structure of being like, yes, here's my songs, here I am, I'm very professional, here you go, we're all going to sing Modern Nature, and then all right, here we go off into the night. Versus now, where I'm like, here's the song I wrote yesterday. I will be sneaking behind you in the crowd.
Yeah, man. And also just like walking around in a room singing a cappella without an instrument, and then doing that, which is sort of a thing I got to explore more because of Largo. People are seated, it's a controlled environment, and there are no phones allowed, so there's no distractions, and it's a small enough room for you to sing both off mic and in mic. And that's been, definitely learning a lot of new stuff just doing that, and being over the top and then dialing it down, and it's been really cool.
It reminded me of my very first live musical experience. My mom took me to see Cats. So this explains a lot about my personality. But little mini baby Pam at I think I was 5, watching Cats and being spellbound by it. And the cats actually climbed into the audience. That was one of the whole things about the performance. Yeah. And I was really into it because I knew all the words to Cats. And my mom told me I could only sing silently so that there wasn't just a child very loudly singing along with the musical. But I think the performers had heard me and they saw me mouthing along with the words. And so they crawled into our row and were singing at me and playing with me. Wow. And that was kind of my first exposure to that kind of performance. And I still love that. And I admire people who perform in that way because I personally am terrified to do that. I almost freak out when I'm performing because I'm so hyped. She says when she sings very mellow songs, but it
so it was like a flashback to Cats, really, when
when you appeared behind me. I was like, what are you doing?
That's amazing. That's good.
So I find it inspiring and fun, and I'm excited to see what happens 20 years from now. I don't know if we'll still be podcasting. Maybe then we'll just be talking with our brainwaves from Mars. And so I'm excited to see what's lurking on the horizon.
Yeah. God, yeah. Anything could happen. God.
Right? I guess in closing, what, it sounds like you've really surprised yourself in the last 20 years, but what would you tell anyone else who is starting now, either writing a book, writing an album, deciding I want to be a performer? What would you tell them?
Oh, that's a good question. It's sometimes I think about young performers coming up now, or songwriters, and on one hand, it's easy to say, well, there are more ways of doing your own thing now and being heard, or bypassing certain gatekeepers now. But at the same time, it's harder than ever, it would seem to me, because it's much more fragmented. And so sometimes I'm like, I don't even know how they do it. How do people break through, become heard, and all these things? And but of course, that's more on how do you cut through the noise? But if it's purely just artistically, I don't know. There's a thing, and it's a boring piece of advice, because it's not what you want to hear. But I think that, to me, persistence is a sort of the currency that reveals itself over time. And of course, that is having now put out records for almost 20 years. And I feel I feel blessed to have an audience. It's certainly no picnic to sort of make a living in this world, in this climate, and doing what I do. I feel blessed that I can do it, but it's not always a comfortable ride. It's certainly not a private. I certainly don't go on tours in private jets or or even private buses for that matter. It's you know, so it's a combination of things, but it is the dedication to the work and that kind of persistence over time. I think that builds character. That is and it builds the character that I think people will only truly see the sort of the value of or the meaning behind over time. And so I really believe in building a body of work of persistence, of like sort of commitment to my project. And as little as possible, I try to be as little as possible distracted by other things that try to sort of sway me in this direction or that direction, and just try to follow very purely my own sort of muse and stay true to what is my project and not take any shortcuts, I guess.
Well, and it seems like as you've been persistent, your passion has like evolved because your albums have evolved. It's not like you can mistake one album for the other.
No, exactly. I certainly have. I'm you know, you definitely. I've surprised people, audience. You know, I've surprised audiences sometimes in a way that has been welcome, and sometimes in a way that has maybe not been what everybody's after. And you have to be fine with that. You have to be fine with the fact that what I am into at any given moment, or what I need to express, is not going to correspond with you know, if it corresponds with anyone, you're lucky. And let alone if you can get in touch with those people, that's the biggest challenge of all. So it's like, I find it's an exercise in just being accepting of the fact that, you know, people will fall in and out of love with whatever it is you are most passionate about at any given time. And if you can sustain that somehow still, it will be a powerful, you know, display of passion, persistence, patience, pleasure, please. You know, I've gotten to the point in this promotional cycle where I just like start saying names of albums I've made, hoping that's enough.
And you're talking to Pam, so it's very on.
And I'm talking to Pam. Oh my God, this is perfect.
I feel like we're on. Have you ever watched the American show Sesame Street?
I have watched the Norwegian version of Sesame.
Do they? Yeah. Because they pick a letter, and I feel like today we've picked the letter P.
I'm pretty sure this was that episode. And it's sort of lightly psychedelic, or lightly sort of acid. Yeah.
Well, given that it's a conversation between you and me, that makes complete sense, given what I know of you and what I know of myself.
Absolutely.
Oh, Sondre, thank you so much for joining me on the pod.
Thank you for having me, Pam. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us for this week's episode of Why Not Both? If you liked what you heard, please make sure to like us and subscribe to us on your favorite podcast platform. You can also come hang out with us on social media. We are at WNB the podcast, both on Instagram and Twitter. This season, we are brought to you by Under the Radar. Under the Radar is a nationally distributed print, music, and entertainment magazine and website. You can find them at www.undertheradarmag.com, and feel free to support them on Patreon. Extra special thanks to our producer, Laura Studeris, who has been absolutely amazing. Thank you again, and I look forward to next week's episode.